Now, all of this rain is starting to impact critical systems.
New tonight, raw sewage flowing into Clam Bayou. It happened last August and it's happening now. St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman is dodging questions about what's going on. 10 Investigates Mike Deason, who first uncovered the sewage dump last year, is here with a story that you'll see only on 10. Mike?
Well, Reg and Dion, you may recall last August, after we discovered the city was dumping raw sewage into Clam Bayou in Gulfport, the mayor promised it would never happen again. And that could be why he is reluctant to admit what his own public works director told us about this environmental problem.
You're looking at raw sewage from St. Petersburg overflowing from the manholes in the area around Clam Bayou in Gulfport. Is there any raw sewage that's going into Clam Bayou?
There appears to have been some that went in right over there.
Claude Tankersley is St. Petersburg's new public works director. Before you were here, the mayor said that we wouldn't have raw sewage going into Clam Bayou.
We had an extremely unusual event that happened yesterday.
But despite the fact the area around the bayou is being roped off and signs are warning the surface is contaminated, St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman had nothing to say to upset people in Gulfport.
Upset in Gulfport about
The raw sewage in Clam Bayou.
well, there isn't. My understanding is that's not an issue for this go round.
And then the mayor's staff stepped in.
That's not what he said.
That's exactly. Wait a second, Kevin. Let me ask. Get
That's
a
not.
quick comment.
That's not what he said.
Wait, let me get a quick comment from the mayor, and then. So your understanding is that there's not raw sewage going in.
I think Claude answered the question.
So we turned to Tankersley and asked him to repeat what he said in earshot of the mayor, and that there could be raw sewage in Clam Bayou. Did you not say that?
Mike, stop this baiting stuff. You're
No,
doing.
I'm just asking you. Did you not say?
Don't we already have the answer on tape? Why don't you just use that?
So here we go. Did it get into the bayou?
We know that it got into the canal right over there. So we assume from the canal it may have gotten into the bayou.
Sources in the water department say the problem each time, last year and this, is because the elimination of one of the water treatment plants. A few years ago, the city decided to go from 4 to 3 in order to save millions of dollars.
Last August, the city dumped thousands of gallons of raw sewage into Clam Bayou. Tuesday, city sewers overflowed, dumping thousands of gallons of raw sewage into Clam Bayou again.
One of our rain stations showed 14 inches of rain in 24 hours. You don't design sewers to handle 14 inches of rain in 24 hours, I'm sorry.
After Public Works Director Claude Tankersley admitted within earshot of St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman that raw sewage went into Clam Bayou, Kreisman and his staff try to dodge the issue. The canal will eventually go into the...
No, that's
Wait.
That's not what he said.
Wait, okay.
That's not what he said.
That's exactly... Wait a second. Kevin, let me ask... Get
That's
a
not.
quick comment.
That's not what he said.
Wait, let me get a quick comment from the mayor, and then... So your understanding is that there's not raw sewage going in?
I think Claude answered the question.
Wait, Claude, judge for yourself. Is there any raw sewage that's going into Clam Bayou?
There appears to have been some that went in right over there.
It's clear from the events last summer and now this week, the city of St. Petersburg's sewage system is not able to handle extraordinary rains. Sources say closing down one of the city's sewage treatment plants to save money is the root cause of the problem.
Raw sewage spilling into a bayou, and the outrage is spreading, while local officials refuse to back the mayor.
10 News at 6 starts right now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Reginald Roundtree.
And I'm Dion Lim. Right away, the outrage continues tonight over the way the city of St. Pete handled the situation. The city's water treatment plants could not handle all the sewage following the rain dumped by Tropical Storm Colin. That, in turn, resulted in a system overload and sewage coming out of the manhole. 10 Investigates Mike Deason first broke this story for you last night. He joins us now in the newsroom. And Mikey, I understand some elected officials are pretty upset tonight.
That's true, Dion. Officials in both St. Petersburg and Gulfport, where Clam Bayou is located, say the situation wasn't handled well. While Tuesday's problem was mechanical and not as onerous as last August when St. Pete dumped the sewage into the bayou, many are not happy.
The discharge of St. Petersburg raw sewage from a manhole into Clam Bayou is causing a major stink in the city of Gulfport.
They said that never again will they discharge into Clam Bayou.
Gulfport City Council member Yolanda Roman is irate that St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman denies what his public works director admits: raw sewage was discharged.
My understanding is that's not an issue for this go round.
Is there any raw sewage that's going into Clam Bayou?
There appears to have been some that went in right over there.
And Roman is also irritated St. Pete officials didn't contact Gulfport.
Do I sound a little angry? Perhaps, because I should not find out about what happened yesterday in the city of Gulfport through your news crew. That was how I find out.
But St. Pete City Council member Carl Nurse says there seems to be some sort of reluctance by the mayor and his administration to be honest with the public, whether it comes to the problems here at Clam Bayou or the fix necessary for the aging and inadequate sewer system.
I think the public can see the truth and can handle the truth.
Nurse says the city needs to spend $100 million to fix the system, and he believes the $6 million from the BP oil settlement is better spent on sewers than the mayor's feel-good projects.
The sewer system cries out that we have to get started in a bigger way, fast.
Many in Gulfport agree.
This is the first storm of 2016, a short-term storm. And look what happened. Tell me what happens if we have a 10-day rain event.
Now, in addition to the Clam Bayou problem, the city did dump thousands of partially treated sewage water gallons from the Albert Whitted plant into Tampa Bay. But do remember, they did have a permit allowing something like this in an emergency, the type of emergency the city experienced this week.
Millions of gallons of partially treated sewage have been poured into Tampa Bay by the city of St. Petersburg. It's all because the water treatment plants couldn't handle the effects of Tropical Storm Colin. However, as 10 Investigates' Mike Deason first reported on Tuesday, raw sewage from St. Pete also flowed into Clam Bayou. And the city is now taking heat for the way it handled the situation.
Surprise factor, annoyance factor, and both do not make me feel good.
Gulfport Council member Yolanda Roman is upset because for the second time in less than a year, raw sewage from St. Petersburg is flowing into Clam Bayou.
The fact that there was staff from the city of St. Petersburg at the discharge site and there was not anyone from the city of Gulfport present during that process tells me that our communication is still not fixed.
It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, to me, just laying the cards on the table is the obvious thing to do.
St. Petersburg Council member Carl Nurse is also critical of the city. Nurse says the mayor and his administration are reluctant to be candid about the problems and the fact the city can't handle the sewage issue without a $100 million fix.
Just tell the truth. That's all.
Nurse says the first step is to take the $6 million BP oil spill money that the city has and spend it on fixing the problem rather than the projects Mayor Rick Kreisman has proposed.
Sewage release after sewage released into the bay. Is St. Petersburg equipped to handle a storm? One lawmaker calls out the city of St. Pete, pushing for an investigation.
Sewage in the water. Our 10 investigation continues into the spill into Clam Bayou. Tonight, officials are calling for action. Since Monday's storm, the city has dumped 12 Olympic-sized swimming pools of partially treated sewage right into Tampa Bay.
Now that's in addition to the raw sewage spilled into Clam Bayou. Now 10 Investigates' Mike Deason, who uncovered the spill, found out a state representative is calling for an investigation into St. Petersburg. Mike?
Well, Reg, in court, State Representative Kathleen Peters is suspicious that St. Petersburg has not kept up with the growth in the area and that not enough has been done to expand the sewer system in St. Pete. Peters believes the DEP investigation will show because of the lack of sewer facility and water treatment expansion, the problems this week and the past years were inevitable.
57,000 gallons of raw sewage in Clam Bayou. 8.5 million gallons of partially treated sewage dumped into Tampa Bay. 15 million gallons of raw sewage dumped into Clam Bayou in August of 2015.
That's why we're contacting the secretary. Exactly why.
Pinellas Representative Kathleen Peters says in this letter to DEP Secretary John Steverson, she's convinced St. Petersburg's perceived inaction on the issue has made for a potential environmental and health disaster.
I have grave concerns that they have not expanded the infrastructure to meet the growth and development that's happened in Pinellas County.
But the city is saying it was hit with an unusually heavy rain event in Collin, and that the partially treated sewage coming out of the Albert Wooded treatment plant has much less what's called fecal chloroform than raw sewage does.
And to put this in perspective, 9 teaspoons of fecal coliform would close this city pool. And what the city of St. Petersburg is doing with the treated sewage is putting the equivalent of 2 one-gallon jugs of human waste into this pool. And that's something most people would never dream of taking a dip in.
It's kind of sad, but I'm sure hopefully it will clear up.
But for now, warning signs are along the waterfront, and St. Pete Council member Carl Nurse says the problem has been years in the making.
They are, a long string of administrations that has tried to kick the can down the road, but there's no more road left. This is the time where we have to face this music.
Nurse says it will cost a minimum of $100 million and 10 years to fix the aging sewer treatment system. Meantime, the city of St. Petersburg didn't comment on the call for the investigation, saying only it has been in constant contact with the DEP. And it says if Peters can come up with a way to help fund the project in the legislature, they will be happy to try to improve the system.
Tonight, a state representative is calling on the Department of Environmental Protection to investigate the city of St. Pete. It all comes after 10 investigators looked into millions of gallons of partially treated sewage being dumped into Tampa Bay this week. And it's not the first time. 10 Investigates Mike Deason continues his investigation into St. Petersburg's sewage woes.
Why are we having so much dumping into our waterways?
And that's why Pinellas State Representative Kathleen Peters sent this letter to the head of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection requesting an investigation. Peters says the city of St. Petersburg had discharged significant amounts of partially treated sewage into the bays around Pinellas County.
The local government has a duty and a responsibility to their citizens, and that's to provide good, clean, potable water, sewer, public safety, and this compromises all of those.
It's not just partially treated St. Petersburg sewage going into area waterways. 10 Investigates has uncovered thousands and thousands of gallons of raw sewage spills dating back to 1995.
Are they taking enough time, money, commitment to fix their infrastructure?
Gulfport Councilmember Yolanda Roman and Representative Peters aren't the only ones who question that. St. Petersburg was fined several $1,000s and forced to sign this consent order in 1999, 17 years ago, promising to improve. Clearly that hasn't happened.
The letter arrived at St. Petersburg City Hall at 6:07 this morning. That letter is from a whistleblower who says there were warnings about flooding and sewage spills. Now, 10 Investigates Mike Deason has been looking at the whistleblower's claims, and Mike, tell us all about it.
Well, Reg, this 11-page letter and copies of the emails and other documents say the city was warned that sewage overflows would happen if it didn't follow the recommendations of a consultant before shutting down the Albert Wooded treatment plant. But it ignored the recommendations. The consultant said to avoid overflows, it was mandatory the capacity at the Southwest treatment plant be expanded by almost 1/3 before the city closed Albert Wooded. But that expansion never happened.
The evidence indicates that they knew.
Former St. Petersburg Mayor Bill Foster points to the consultant's study in 2014 that warned that the Wooded plant could not be closed unless there was a massive expansion of the Southwest plant. However, the letter points out the city shut down Albert Wooded without making recommended upgrades.
They knew that if we had a high storm event that we were going to have these discharges, and they elected to decommission it anyway.
The whistleblower letter is from the chief plant operator at the Northwest treatment plant. He was on the job all day and we couldn't reach him for comment. But his letter states public safety and the environment could possibly be in danger due to the sewage spills.
I think people also wanted to, were real excited about having waterfront acres downtown, and so excited that they led right into this sewage crisis.
Councilmember Steve Cornell opposed closing the plant. He says the city blew it. And he adds the mayor is not being candid by saying the sewage dumped into the bay is clean.
So we're using some terms and saying it's almost reclaimed, it's reclaimed, that when you look at the DEP standards, they don't match. And that's a real problem for me. The city should not be in the business of being vague and misleading people.
Meantime, Foster rejects the administration's argument that the rains this summer were the perfect storm for a disaster.
They haven't had a perfect storm yet. Baker had 3 hurricanes. I had high water events in 2012, 2013, which led us to know that you can't decommission Whitted until you expand and complete Southwest. So they did it anyway.
Now, a city spokesman says because this is a whistleblower letter, the city can't comment. Meantime, the Florida Department of Regulations is preparing a consent order to try to force the city to correct the problem. That should be done early next week.
Bombshell developments in the St. Petersburg sewage crisis. 2 top water officials are suspended. The governor has ordered a DEP investigation, and sources are telling 10 Investigates Mike Deason there could be a criminal investigation. Mike is here to bring us up to speed. Mike?
Well, Reg, you may recall we first told you about this consultant report last Friday. It holds a major key to the sewage crisis, and is the reason St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman suspended the 2 top officials today. The 2 were apparently aware that the consultant report said don't close Albert Whitted treatment plant until the treatment capacity was expanded elsewhere. And St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman maintains he was never informed.
The consultant says the sewage dumps and spills likely never would have happened if the Whitted plant closure had been delayed. 10 Investigates has obtained paperwork showing Engineering and Capital Improvements Director Thomas Gibson and Water Resources Director Steve Levitt were aware of the report. That's why the mayor suspended them today. However, State Rep Kathleen Peters says that does not absolve the mayor.
And the bottom line is the buck stops at the leadership. You know, you can blame all kinds of things, but you got to take ownership. He needs to apologize to the citizens, and he needs to take ownership. He's the administrator of that city, and he should know what's going on.
We tried contacting the 2 water officials. Gibson wasn't home, and his wife angrily said not to come back. Levitt didn't answer the several calls we made to his office and home. Meantime, U.S. Congressman David Jolly is offering protection for any more Water Department whistleblowers that come forth like Craven Askew. He says the feds should step in.
This certainly rises to the level of an EPA investigation in terms of the environmental impact, but likely an investigation that goes much beyond that as well.
And while Jolly hints at a criminal investigation, sources say Florida Fish and Wildlife is taking a hard look at sewage dumping and spills to see if laws were broken. Meantime, Peters says she expects the investigation the governor ordered could dig up more answers.
They're going to dig a little bit deeper into this, and I think they're prepared to dig as far as they possibly can.
Now, I tried to talk with Mayor Kreisman today. His office told me he was unavailable for comment today, but he is planning to address the issue Thursday afternoon at the city council meeting. Meantime, the mayor's spokesman, Ben Kirby, issued a statement saying the DEP investigation is politically motivated.
Sewage spill scandal. The controversy over the new raw sewage overflowing and some of it dumping into the bay takes a new twist tonight. Now there's evidence. Someone in the city of St. Petersburg maliciously buried critical information. 10 Investigates Mike Deason, who's been pushing for transparency on this issue for more than a year here, is with us with the details. Hey, Mikey.
Hey, Mark, how are you? You might recall last week we reported that this consultant report warned the city 2 years ago that the sewage problem was inevitable if Albert Whitted's treatment plant was shut down before the city increased its capacity to treat sewage. But the mayor and city council say they never saw that report, and now there's proof. Someone ordered that the elected officials be kept in the dark.
Yeah, that smells real bad to me.
Mayor Rick Kreisman isn't talking about sewage, but rather these 2 newly discovered memos. The memos are from the consulting firm which in 2014 warned the city about closing Albert Whitted treatment and the sewage overflows. The first memo shows the consultants were going to brief council at this meeting about the 2014 study. But the second memo, 2 days before the meeting, shows the plan to brief council was removed from the consultant presentation.
Something and somebody specifically directed that consultant not to do that. And I don't know who it was. I sure would like to know. And I sure would like to know why.
While the mayor isn't sure, and the consultants say they can't remember who directed them to make the report disappear, as we reported last week, Kreisman suspended these two top water officials who saw the report and didn't tell him.
And there is the potential criminal investigation. Do you think this rises to that?
I don't know if it rises to criminal. Certainly, if somebody had an intention, and as a result of their intention, laws were violated, then yeah, there could be criminal.
Meantime, Kreisman says he is determined to find out who was behind the effort to hide the critical information about the sewage overflows from his administration, and the mayor says more heads will roll.
This is bad government. This is not what's supposed to happen, and we need to find out what happens so we can try and make sure we have processes in place to prevent it from happening again.
Meantime, 10 Investigates has learned that several environmental groups have started the process to sue the city of St. Petersburg for violating the Clean Water Act. Now, the mayor received that notice after we sat down with him, and the city has not yet responded to the suit.
The mayor of St. Pete admits to city council the water department is in turmoil. 2 top officials were suspended just yesterday for not sharing information that could have prevented this. Sewage overflows all over the city. 10 News reporter Mike Deason has been on top of this story from the very beginning. He just stepped out of that city council meeting where they are talking about the sewage problems right now. Mike, tell us, what do you know tonight?
Well, it's still going on, but the mayor realizes this is a crisis that attacks the fiber of his administration. His public works director says the city is in a 2-year emergency until it can expand its capacity of treating sewage. And the city and the mayor also acknowledged that the city made a huge miscalculation. That miscalculation was shutting down Albert Whitted sewage treatment plant before expanding the capacity, and that led to millions of gallons of sewage being dumped into Tampa Bay. Now the mayor says he will do whatever is necessary to keep from dumping sewage into Tampa Bay.
We must expedite our work. If the quickest thing to do is fully reopen Albert Whitted, I support it being reopened. Regardless, the upgrades we have planned must continue and must happen ASAP. As such, I've directed procurement to require that work be performed 7 days a week instead of 5.
Now, the reopening of Albert Whitted, if it happens, and it's something the Public Works Director is recommending, will be very expensive, but the city says it must do that, at least to keep it online for the next 2 years until capacity can be expanded at another one of the sewage treatment plants. The mayor also said that more heads will roll because the problem stems from a 2014 consultant report that said, don't close Whitted until you expand capacity. And that was never shared with the mayor or city council. And the mayor says he fears there are other consultant reports that the water department didn't share as well.
Well, meantime, a sewage emergency in St. Petersburg, and a congressman says law enforcement needs to step in. All of this as leaders explain how the city came to dump millions of gallons of partially treated sewage into Tampa Bay. 10 Investigates' Mike Deason has been covering this crisis for more than a year now. He joins us live now from City Hall. Hey, Mikey.
Hey, Dion, a lot has happened in the past half hour. Congressman David Jolly, first off, with that investigation you talked about, had met with the whistleblower who was in the water department and told him what was going on. He says it's a state investigation and state officials agree and say they will launch an investigation. He's turning over all the material he has to state investigators. Meantime, City Council today heard from Mayor Rick Kreisman, who had a much different tone than yesterday when he said calls for a Department of Environmental Protection investigation were politically motivated. Today, the mayor admitted that the sewage crisis was caused because the Albert Whitted sewage plant was shut down in 2015, although a consultant report a year earlier said it couldn't be shut down unless expanded facilities were put into effect to treat sewage in St. Petersburg. Today, Kreisman said everybody shares the blame.
None of us were present for all of it, but all of us were present for some of it, and we are all present now. And so it is up to us, and especially me, to guide us forward and make sure we at least get the future right. Our residents and our business owners are depending on us.
Now, the mayor says neither he nor city council ever saw that consultant report, and that's why 2 top water officials were suspended yesterday. Likely they will be fired, and the mayor says more heads will roll. He also says he wants to do anything from keeping sewage in Tampa Bay, and what he will do is consider opening Albert Whitted once again. His public works director says that's something that they must do, but he also warned it would be very expensive, and he plans to have the problem addressed by working 7 days a week to expand capacity rather than 5 days a week.
It's change. A change at St. Petersburg City Hall, and the change is at the top. Not in personnel, but in message.
St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman is talking one-on-one with 10 Investigates' Mike Deason. Mike has asked questions before, but tonight, Kreisman is talking openly and talking candidly, mostly about the hottest issue facing the city and his administration.
This has been horrible.
St. Petersburg Mayor Rick Kreisman is talking about the sewage spills and dumping in Tampa Bay, a serious problem that has dogged his administration for more than a year.
I'll be the first one to say I haven't slept so badly during my entire time as mayor as I have since this has all happened.
Kreisman has had a contentious relationship at times with multiple outlets that have reported critical stories. 10 Investigates has reported several stories that weren't flattering to the mayor, and Kreisman admits he hasn't handled the situation well, but he vows to change.
I made mistakes. We did some things very poorly.
I mean, our interchange down at Clam Bayou, people point to that all the time.
Yeah, and again, that's I can't allow being frustrated to interfere with how I'm communicating.
You must know that there's some people that said you were thin-skinned as mayor and didn't take criticism very well, and certainly you got plenty from me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I can understand why people would say that. I think I was, and maybe I let my frustrations get the better of me. I was frustrated by the whole situation.
The mayor is talking about top city water officials hiding this 2014 consultant report. This report warned the city that shutting down the Albert Whitted sewage treatment plant without adding new treatment capacity would lead to a sewage crisis that the city is facing now.
That report, which says there could be an issue if you shut it down, was never shared with us.
But sharing blame for the current sewage crisis with former mayors Rick Baker and Bill Foster is something that both Baker and Foster say is unfair.
They said to me, I just wish you'd say, I'm taking all the responsibility.
Well, I'm the guy sitting in the seat. They're not sitting here any longer, so I'm the one who has to deal with it.
And taking responsibility?
Yeah, we've said we got to deal with this situation. We're responsible for what happens in the city.
At the DEP meeting a couple of weeks ago, George Kritikos from Clearwater, the first thing he said was, I want to apologize. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, well, we do. I mean, we apologize for our lack of communication, for the way we communicated, not being as clear on things.
And as the mayor tries to plug this sewage leak, he seems to have a changed attitude in dealing with the public, city council, as well as the media. Is it a real epiphany, or the fact that he's up for re-election next year?
I think too many politicians their main concern is getting re-elected instead of doing their job.
So now the true test of whether the mayor is doing a good job and has really changed will be the next time there's an issue in the city and how Mayor Kreisman handles it. Mike Deason, 10 Investigates.